We'll be here.
That's excellent. Thank you. Welcome to our Educational Affairs Committee meeting tonight. We have a very busy agenda with lots of information to share, so we'll get right into it with a board roll call. Ms. Loman, would you give us a start?
Jennifer Lemon here.
Robin Murphy here.
Mia Blitzstein here.
Pam Henry here.
Ross Whiting here.
Leah Mulhern present.
Zachary Epps present. Charles Brazil Williams present.
Excellent. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
So moved.
Second.
And Ms. Blitzstein second. Can I, all in favor? Aye. All right. We have a very busy meeting this evening, and so I'm going to turn it right over to Dr. Smith and her team to present this evening. Dr. Smith.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's Educational Affairs Committee meeting. Tonight's presentation is all about our special education programming. We are going to hear from Dr. Catrambone, our Director of Special Education, as well as Ms. Kuchler, one of our special education supervisors, Ms. D, one of our special education supervisors, and also Dr. Lank. They are going to just walk us through some general information to start, because we don't want to make the assumption that everyone is starting from the same place. So some of this information may be repeat, some of this information may sound like something you've heard before, but we want to make sure that this presentation speaks to those of us who are new to this content and those of us who are more seasoned pros. So the information may start off a little slower for those of us who have been in this work a little longer, but we do want to make sure that we cover all of our bases. And without any further delay, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Catrambone, our Director of Special Education.
Stay muted.
Stay muted. Good. All right. Thank you, Board of Directors. I'm really excited to be here. Let me just preface this by saying that in my 6 or 7 months that I've been here, the work that we've been doing has been invigorating and very exciting. One thing I do want to share and I do want to make known is there is a lot of good things going on in Cheltenham. And a part of what you're going to hear tonight is about the work that we're doing to bring it all together. And I'm very, very, very confident that you're going to be pleased with what you hear. But to reiterate on what Dr. Smith said, I have 3 amazing supervisors here in the Cheltenham School District. We've started the high school with Miss Jaclyn Digianivittorio. Did I get that right? Close enough. I'm trying. Digianivittorio. I should know, I'm Italian. Is Allison Kuchler, who is in Elkins Park and at Cedarbrook, so she takes care of the 5 to 8 at middle range. And then Dr. Lank is K to 4, so she has the 4 elementary buildings. We talk and meet multiple times daily about a lot of things in the world of special ed, and it is truly awesome to work with all the building administrators, Dr. Smith and Dr. Smith and my Office of Education team. So without further ado, as Dr. Smith said, I'm going to go through and just wanted to give people a background of when I got here and in being in previous districts, I've always been a fan of what is the vision, what's the mission, what's the purpose of the school district. And many school districts have been charged with developing mission and vision statements, right? And in some places, they end up becoming a placard on the wall on somebody's desk and never get revisited. And I've never subscribed to that. I do believe that that speaks volumes, and every bit of our work, even that in special ed, must start with this. So I wanted to start off with the mission and vision statement, because that is a lot of the work and a lot of where we come back to as we work through special ed. But again, I'm not going to read it to you. You've seen it, and hopefully it resonates with you. So I want to talk just a little bit about, for those who are not familiar with what special education is. Special education has been around since, officially in law, since 1975. It started off as the Education Handicapped Act, was later changed to what we know now as the Individual with Disabilities Education Act. And I think that changed around 1990, otherwise known as IDEA. It was meant to support states and localities in protecting and meeting the individual needs of students that were identified to have disabilities. And if you're a history buff a little bit like me, you know that prior to that, there was a lawsuit, the Pennsylvania Association for Retarded Citizens back in the 70s. It's called the Park decision. It's kind of like a springboard for this. And then even prior to that, there's some legislation, or I'm sorry, this came off of the Office of the Civil Rights in 1964 and Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. So there's all the connections to all the work we're doing. The 6 tenets on the right-hand side are the spirit of IDEA. That has not changed. since this original IDA went into effect in 1975. It talks about developing an individual education plan for students who qualify, the roadmap, so to speak, of their education and their plan and how we're going to meet their needs. It talks about what you hear as FAPE, because in education, as we all know, we're a world of acronyms. So FAPE is free and appropriate public education. Every child deserves that, and it is our charge to do the best we can to do this. We provide students with as much support as we can, and we start off by seeing where can we support them, and what you see and hear is LRE, the least restrictive environment. That is looking at the student in their current educational setting, often referred to as the regular ed classroom or the general ed classroom, and how can we best meet their needs if they're an identified student in that environment first and foremost, and then we go to the supports they may need outside of that environment. We must give each student an appropriate and non-biased evaluation. Parents and teacher participation is required. And of course, there's what's called procedural safeguards, which communicate to parents their rights as a parent of a child with a disability. We have what's called child fund. Basically, in a nutshell, the state has policies and procedures to ensure that, just like it says, we have to find children. We have to go out and I'm not saying we go out and we like knock on doors or we go to all these different places to find these children. We have to work in collaboration with a lot of different agencies in our community. We have, and very fortunate to have a good intermediate, the Montgomery County Intermediate, it helps us. Parent requests or parent information brought to us is helpful. Outside reports that are sent to us, we have to consider from parents and other places. I want to go to private schools, sometimes reach out to us and say we have a child here, or we have a child that's going to a private school and the parent reaches out to us. We have connections with our preschools. We also have connections. We don't have connections necessarily directly, but we also want to communicate with pediatricians because they're seeing those children from birth to 5 before they become school age, or birth to 3 before they become eligible for services through the IU. And as you heard a few months ago from Ms. Keene's office, we have MTSS, our multi-tier system of supports, which is critical. And even though that is for all students and sort of a regular education thing, it does collaborate and mirror well with what we do in special education. So Ms. Keene and I are in constant communication, making sure that we are working in that aspect as well, because that is another way that we identify children's needs. I'm not going to read this to you. These are the 13 federally mandated disabilities that children can qualify under. So there's 13 right there. It's a 2-pronged qualifier. So if you hear that, it means the child must, when they go through an evaluation, must be determined to have one of these 13 disabilities and be in need of what they call specially designed instruction, which you can see up there. Address the unique needs of the child that's resulting from the child's disability. In most cases, when they have a disability, they are in need of specially designed instruction. Child may still need specially designed instruction and not have a determined disability, and we have other measures through MTSS and other ways to support those students as well. And the most important thing on here at the bottom, which I think many parents aren't really in tune to, and even sometimes educators need to be reminded of this, your disability classification does not drive your placement. Okay, that's a very broad term, but in a nutshell, it means if you are a child and you are determined to have a disability of autism, that does not mean you are going to go to the autistic support classroom and be serviced by the autistic support teacher. In most cases, yes, you will. But you could be a child that's diagnosed with autism and just need a few academic services or a few behavior services and get services from a learning support teacher, or get a lot of services right within your general education environment. And I think that is very critical to be reminded of. If a child is found to be eligible under IDEA, then the IEP team at a school has 30 days to complete and draft an IEP and propose it to the parent. And in 30 days, that meeting is held, and these are the main components of the IEP. This is not an all-inclusive list. Special considerations are things like, does the child have a language issue? Does the child have behavioral needs? Is there a vision needs that need to be met? Present levels are included. What are the child's strengths and needs? All inclusive, behavioral, academic, social, everything is included. The team will develop annual goals based on those needs. They are charged with measuring and reporting progress, and that progress report must come out at least as many times as it is for any other child. So if any other child is getting a progress report, they get one. They get a progress report anyway as a child with an IEP, along with a typical report card and grading during a typical marking period. There's related services, occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech and language therapy, to name a few. Supplementary aids and services is something else that came out in the late 90s when IDA was reauthorized. And that's, are there any supplementary aids and services? There are infinite numbers. Behavior plan, adult, extra adult assistance, an augmentative device. You name it, it's probably part of the supplementary aid and services. Any program modifications that need to be made within the schools to accommodate for that child, and modifications such as training or anything else that the personnel need to be made aware of. And then it's very important towards the end is it must be determined for LRE purposes, least restrictive environment, the extent and the reasoning why the child is not participating with their general ed peers. So for example, they may need small group direct instruction for decoding. That cannot be done in the typical environment. So they might get special education services for 30 or 45 minutes. That would be the time that they're not included with their regular education peers. So that is background of special ed, just to kind of give you a real quick overview. Our work this year has been around bringing it all together. And we are, the three supervisors and I are working on developing a framework. And I would slide back to the mission and vision statement, but that is what we built this all off of. We are talking about trying to develop a framework for special education students based on what all students receive, which is high quality, standards aligned curriculum and instruction based on evidence-based practices. We need to have balanced system of assessments, not assess them in one way multiple times, balanced system, and including that professional development that the teachers need in collaboration. Off of that, we are focused on the 4 areas that we have here for supports in Cheltenham. We have life skills support, we have autistic support, learning support, and we have emotional support. We want to align our work first and foremost with what we already have. We already have a solid curriculum in place. We have resources and programs in place. We have PBIS, we have MTSS, we have the strategic plan, which includes diversity, equity, belonging. We have all of these things. We have the academic curriculum. We have all of these things in place. That's what we're basing our work off of first and foremost. We want to review what we have in place because there are, as I said in the beginning, a tremendous amount of good things going on in this district. We want to make sure that we're balancing this to determine the effectiveness of what we're implementing, not just doing it and saying, I think it's good. No, we want to measure and make sure that what we're doing is effective for our students. And we do this through that collaboration. So we have to embed that current and ongoing professional development, which I'm fortunate that 3 really awesome supervisors to assist with that. So what does this look like? We are starting with I'm sorry, yeah. So I'm gonna repeat myself. We have learning support. That is just a tidbit of what that looks like. Continuum of programming based on instructional level, area of need, awareness, curricular material, teacher training, guiding documents. I'm going to jump to autistic support. And again, these are not all inclusive lists. We have social skills, behavior management, communication, augmentative and assistive communication. We are working with PATAN, which is the Pennsylvania System of Technical Training, Ed Myers and Wingcoat, and Appenspark, I believe, yeah. Not that often, I apologize for that. ABA, you may have heard, applied behavioral analysis, verbal behavior milestones assessments. We look at academics first inclusion when we are going to do that. Life skills, some of the same things you'll see there too, augmentative and alternative communication. We're working with the Bucks County Intermediate Unit at Burnside, our life skills program, collaborating with them. Looking at medical components. So again, these are not all inclusive lists. Emotional support, behavior management, emotional regulation, coping skills, utilizing what we call board certified behavior analysts, RBTs, registered behavior technicians. So again, I walked into a district that has all of this support and it's really awesome. And all we're doing in this firm is trying to bring this together to align it horizontally, and also vertically, because we have students that transition from one building to a 5-6 building to a 7-8 and to a high school. These are the members that are a part of our framework implementation. Right now, we are at the central office, building admin, teacher, related service, and paraprofessional stage. We've only had 1 meeting. We've gathered information. We are ready to start our work in a few weeks on the next phase. And then we will be bringing parents and getting their feedback, and then students as well. Basically, by the end, we just want to have a living, breathing document that's going to work in Cheltenham. This is not a final document that's going to be stamped in April of this year. It is going to be something that we're going to implement in 24-25, but it's something that has to be ongoing and looked at and reviewed. Because there's changes, right? We live in a world of change, and we're going to look at all these supports because there's always some really awesome things that come out that kind of change our thinking and to better support our students. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Kuchler for learning support, and I will be your guide.
Great, thank you. So I am facilitating the Learning Support Framework Committee. Right here on this screen is a definition of what learning support is per the Pennsylvania School Code. So these things that we're going to be talking about are all services, not necessarily the place where they happen. But learning support is really focused primarily on academics and academic deficit areas. Thank you. So for our learning support framework development, we have at least 3 meetings that we're going to have. Maybe we'll have 4. What we're doing is really looking to see what are the materials that we use within our learning support classrooms for students who need instruction or specially designed instruction for their disability related needs. Okay, so we're looking really to try to align that with the core curriculum. We want every child is entitled to core curriculum instruction. We just need to figure out how we modify or adapt that for students who need it. And so we're trying to lay that out in the framework so that there's continuity there. We're looking at materials that are specific for certain needs. For example, students may have only decoding phonemic awareness needs, they may have comprehension needs, may have math fluency or application. There are different materials that you can use for those different things, and some things are comprehensive for both. We're also looking within the framework to help for teachers to have ideas to propose goals that are more consistent across areas of need, and they're not necessarily specific to how one teacher may write a goal or how what materials a building might use. It's specific to the student needs and what the students display. So those are our 3 things that we're really working on in our framework. One of the things that we're doing as part of the learning support framework that's unique to this is that we're piloting the use of many different programs this year. So at the beginning of the year, we reached out to all of our special education teachers and said, who would like to pilot a specific research-based program? If you are teaching reading, English, math, writing, would you be interested in doing this? So we had 22 teachers who said that they were interested in doing this. We have 7 different programs. Somewhere, each school is doing at least 1, some are doing 2 or 3, which is exciting. We did, well, I'll get into that in just a minute. So the pilot piece is happening, and they are using targeted goal-based programming. So if a student has a math goal for, let's say they're working on a 5th grade level, but they're an 8th grade student, they're using a specific program or 2 different programs for piloting to see what would be most effective for that child. We're also looking at curricular materials that we can use to replace the gen ed curriculum for students who have a wide discrepancy between their instructional level and their grade level. And we want to really provide them with core instruction in the special ed class. And we're also looking at programs that are there to supplement the general education curricular materials. So for kids who are still in the gen ed environment for their reading, English, math instruction, but they need some additional instruction to help to close the gaps that maybe are a little bit smaller. So we have all sorts of different programs for both going on. What we have done so far, you'll see, and what we're going to do for the end is coming up too. So in the fall, we first identified several different programs based on the general needs of all of our kids through K-12 from an academic instructional standpoint. We asked the teachers who were interested, and then we provided every teacher, at this point, every teacher who's going through it has had 1 PD, and some of them have had 2. Most of the programs that we worked with offered about 6 hours of PD unless they didn't feel like their programs needed 6 hours of PD. So that's what we did all through the fall. Most teachers started providing this instruction in December. There were parent letters that went out to each of the children's families who were participating, parent or guardian letters explaining what was happening. So we continued with the program PD while we also implemented the different instruction. And the next thing that we just talked about with our principals today is that our teachers are going to be opening up their classrooms to showcase some of the pilot programs and how they work, and then for our administrators to go and see what they're like. So we have a lot of different things going on. We want them to have the opportunity to see what our teachers like and what our students like may be different than what our principals like. And so we have to have all those perspectives in there too. So that's what we're working through at this point. And then in the spring, through some of that observation and through some other means, we're going to be doing some qualitative data collection. But also each of the programs that we're working on, that we're working through, has some sort of quantitative data collection reports that we can pull. Some are embedded into the Gen Ed program, and they're just extensions, so we can isolate for certain kids that are going through it. So we'll be pulling a lot of different data points. And then we'll be coming to the full board to seek board approval for any purchases we want to make for materials and PD. You know, hopefully by May is our goal for sure, so that we can implement for the 24-25 school year.
So
Dr. Lank.
That's
Okay.
me. So my framework that I'm working on is the autistic support and the life skills program. And we decided that we are going to have one committee for both programs. We are going to probably create two different documents, but collaborate together. And really what we're talking about here is we're really talking about autistic and life, I said learning support, sorry.
No, you didn't.
Autistic support and life skills, we're talking about our low incidence programs. So some of the things that make it a little bit different than some of the other programs is that you'll see there is a higher staff to student ratio based on student needs as identified in the student's IEP. Also, often there are positive behavior support plans, and then there's direct instruction in the areas of reading, math, and science. And often we are using alternative curricular materials for those academic areas. Next. Oh, sorry.
I was with you.
Same thing for life skills support. As Dr. Catrambone said, we are working really close through the Bucks County IU on, looking a little deeper in their programming. But one of the things that they have is they have a high staff to student ratio, again, based on students' IEP needs. That's what reflects the staffing of the different supports that are provided. And then they are also working on functional academics. And then again, similar with the autistic support, some of them may require some augmentative communication, and we work closely with our speech therapists to make sure that we offer that support. Our framework. So we are fortunate enough, we have 28 participants who participated in our framework. And one of the wonderful things that came out of our initial meeting was the participants were really adamant on inviting paraprofessionals. So we're going to have our next meeting on February 1st. And we have, there have been many paraprofessionals who are interested in our framework. And so they're going to come and join us and have a voice in this process in our next. So I thought that was really great that their voice is really valued. As you can see, there is a host of participants from all different areas of the district. Building administrators, we have some principals, we have central admin, general ed and special ed teachers. We have, of course, teachers in those programs right now, but then we also have other teachers. And the nice thing is that everyone has a voice. Like I had a gen ed teacher who said, I don't really know anything about life skills and autistic support. I said, perfect, come join us. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk about what impact you can have on these children being successful in your classroom. So that was really wonderful. As Dr. Catrambone said, we had our first committee meeting, December 1st. Again, it was great. There was a lot of conversation, a lot of collaboration, a lot of discourse, which was great. I'm looking forward to our next meeting that we have on February 1st to kind of break it down a little bit more and really dive into creating these documents. Our goal, Our goal, similar, is to create a program continuum from K-12 and identify professional development for all staff. Sorry. Some of the highlights that we are that are happening this year, we are working with Patton and the Autism Initiative at Myers and Elkins Park. That has been a great experience. We have 2 consultants that come into the buildings often. I'm not sure if it's once a month or once every 6 weeks. They come, they provide feedback. We have a internal coach. Dr. Brown Beasley is our school district internal coach who works with the program. We are also working with Patton, the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit, with our WinCode program. Again, they come in a little less often, more on a consultative basis, and they come in and they work with the teachers and provide feedback to the teachers, and they just, help and mentor the teachers. Autism Boot Camp, I participated in it, our teachers participated in it, and actually some of the paraprofessionals from Myers are participating in it next week. It's a 3-day intensive camp for intensive teaching. We had some teachers who participated in the summer in a week-long training at the Timothy School. We had a 2-day training for VB-MAP, which is verbal behavior milestone assessment and placement and program. We had training for Unique Learning System, which is a cross-curricular program that our autistic support and our life skills teachers use. And we also had some trainings in early learning skill builders. Our life skills have participated in similar paraprofessional trainings, but they also work weekly with the Bucks County Intermediate.
All right, this is D, my friend tried it.
Digianivittorio. I've been working with a group of people to focus on emotional support, which this is programming that typically services students who have difficulty with emotional regulation, behavior management, maybe some social skills, peer and adult interactions, really focusing on things that they have difficulty with kind of to help them build the skill set to be like active community members and moving on in their next stages of life, which something COVID has taught all of us is that emotions are big and they're real, and it's helping the students have that skill set so that they can utilize that, in the real world. So move forward. Can you move on to the next slide?
It is frozen.
It's frozen. Okay, there we go.
All right, this is my next one. Sorry. All right, so we had the opportunity to have our first committee meeting. We were small but mighty. So I would say that everybody there, and something that I can take away from that with everyone speaking, is that whole, and this is, I know, something that like bleeds Cheltenham, is inclusivity. Our students, they're not your students, they're not my students, they're our students. And so even the general education teachers that we're participating with, they're our students. Like, I want to make sure that they can be meaningfully involved in my classroom and everyone can feel like they're part of this community, which can be ostracizing when you have the difficulty with emotional regulation. So we had members from the central and building administration, we had special education teachers, general education teachers, related service providers, like our Lakeside counselor had joined us. And then the same deal is that a lot of our teachers were like, it would be really great to have our paraprofessionals because they do support with behavior management strategies in the schools. So that is something that I encourage everyone to like invite your paraprofessionals that are within our district to come support this work. So we got to meet back in December, and we actually have our next training or next meeting scheduled for February 6th. So we're looking forward to that. Like I said, expanding our capacity with the people who are joining. And then we'll have a spring date, to be determined. But so our goals is that same idea, it's pretty consistent. You'll hear it between all of us, is that we're trying to align our work to existing curriculum and resources. We're reviewing the current resources and programs that we have in place and their effectiveness, really kind of utilizing like data-driven decisions on what are we doing and offering to our students. Reviewing the current assessments in place and effectiveness, and then current and ongoing professional development. It's that lifelong learners is what we push for, and that's what our educators want, and that's what our staff members want, is they want to learn and to be able to, because it's ever evolving. Right now, they're even looking at it with the DSM-5 to the DSM-6, like changing potentially the emotional disturbance label, right? So it's something that's continuously ongoing. And so because of that, they want to keep growing in their capacity as educators and as staff members in an educational setting. So Patan, which Dr. Catrambone discussed earlier, so they have done like extensive research with quality indicators on looking at emotional support programs. And so that's going to be part of our guiding documents, is looking at our program based off of the quality indicators that Patan has put out. So very research driven, very supported. And this was actually something that kind of aligned with work that Ms. Kuchler started at the high school last year. Now we're expanding it, so we have that vertical and horizontal alignment. And those areas in the indicators that they focus on are like academic instruction and support, social emotional instruction and support, behavior management, collaboration and communication. Don't mind me. Evaluation and assessment, post-secondary transition, as well as professional development. And so we're going to utilize, like I said, that document to help support us in looking at what are we doing, how are we doing it, what can we improve on, because that's always the goal as educators. So I believe that's my last slide.
And before I jump back to Dr. Lank, I just want to emphasize that even though each of these supervisors are doing work in a particular framework, you can see a lot of the common language. We meet formally at least once a week, but we talk all the time. So they have their hand in all this. We all have our hand in all of this, because when they're in their buildings, they are supervising special ed in its totality. So even though, you know, Dr. Lank may be helping with the life skills and autistic support, she still knows everything that's going on with the emotional support development and learning support development, which is crucial to our work. With that, I'm going to pitch it back to Dr. Lank to talk about some work that she's been assigned to do, right?
Right. So
Done well.
Yeah, thank you. Paraprofessional training, as I said a little bit earlier, they are integral to the success of our students. And so we were really intentional in the planning of their training this year. Historically, there's been a lot of online training, a lot of, programs, things like that, So we were really intentional to make sure that they were getting in-person training, interactive training, and that was purposeful to their specific jobs. So there's a lot of targeted training. The great thing about having the early dismissal, sorry. The great thing about having early dismissal is we get to have them face-to-face much more often. Some of the training that we have done, the paraprofessionals in the autistic support program, they participated in the 2-day BB-MAP training. They've also, like I said a little earlier, they're participating in the autism boot camp. And then they participate alongside their teachers in the autism team teaching training, and then the master teacher training is the online training that they do, not very often. But one of the other things that we do is the para competencies. If a paraprofessional does not have 2 years of college, PDE says that we have to have them complete a para competency. So that's all part of their professional development. They participated in our curriculum material trainings that our teachers participated in as well. They're in the classrooms. It's really important for them to understand what is being taught to help support the children in those classrooms. Actually, tomorrow, one of our occupational therapists is going to do a hands-on interactive training on how occupational therapy can positively impact a student's classroom performance. They've also had training in applied behavior analysis, behavior supports. Dr. Brown Beasley has graciously done a number of trainings on behavior supports and how to successfully support students in the classroom. Most of them are CPR and first aid trained, and we have many collaborators. We are working with one of the things that we're working with is with Patton. We are working with them in their paraprofessional department on providing like robust training through them. We're also working with the Montgomery County intermediate unit, some behavior companies, and we were also with some district professionals. So if anyone wants to do a paraprofessional training, you let me know, I'll sign you up. Dr. Kat has done some for me as well, so thank you. And Dr. D, future, yeah.
Good. Just one note, you've heard Dr. Brown Beasley's name mentioned several times. She's the internal coach for our Autism Initiative. And she's working and training and helping with paraprofessionals. She's a board certified behavior analysis with the district, just to clarify. The end.
Right.
For now.
Ms. Kuchler, Ms. D, Dr. Catrambone, and Dr. Lank, thank you so much for the presentation this evening. And thank you for your work on this. It means a great deal to our students and families. At this time, I'll turn it over to our board members for questions.
Mine's right now.
Go
Thank you. It's probably a little, thank you very much. I know I'm actually impressed that we did all of that in 36 minutes. Because it's a lot of information. And I think that at first, when Dr. Smith showed us the presentation and, she acknowledged that it'll seem a little slow or like review at first, but it actually, I think, set a really good foundation for all of us to kind of be on the same page with, we might have known 90% of it, but we're missing that one piece. So thank you for kind of pulling it back and then swinging the other way and diving deep. I appreciate that. And I just want to acknowledge that two things. One, 7 programs to pilot seems like a lot, but I think it's awesome to, I wonder, maybe rip off the Band-Aid. Let's see what's working, and so that we can, to your point, start off next year with some new programs hopefully in place that actually we have found to be effective. So I'm excited about that. And I think it's awesome. Everyone mentioned, all of you, I think, how important our paraprofessionals are. And so I'm excited, one, that they're involved in the processes because their voice is valued and their support is needed. We know how much we need to fill every single one of those spots when they're open. And so I think that valuing them and their input is awesome, and giving them, it looked like a lot of training, a lot of resources so that they can be more effective. So I just want to say thank you, because I think that's awesome to get them the supports that they need so that they can be more effective and creating this big picture. So thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
I just have a quick comment. So first of all, appreciate the presentation. It does provide just some insight into what is being built. I appreciate that. I also appreciate the reflection on qualitative measure. I think that's something that I'm not sure exactly what that looks like. My background is not in education, but I'm really intrigued by what that will be and how we're going to track it in all of the different programs that we're piloting. Because I think ultimately we do have to go through that like plan, do, check, act process, right? Is it good? Does it do what it's intended to do? Do we keep it? Do we try it again? Do we change it? I think that's going to be very important ultimately when we have so many things happening at the same time. I think the cycle, I think about just my manufacturing experience, sometimes we can move quickly through certain types of experiments and projects because we understand the quality of them and move on. So I just wanted to share that tidbit. It came up in every one of the aspects of what I heard tonight. So I'm encouraged by that. Thank you.
It's very important. Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Some.
Thank you, first of all of you for the presentation. I will also say that was amazing. I don't know if you practiced that all together.
We're with each other.
And I also just want to start by saying I appreciate what a significant undertaking it is to sort of capture everything, wrangle it all together, develop a framework for moving forward, because I think that is something that is much needed and has been missing for a very, very long time in the district. So I appreciate that undertaking. Couple questions. One that I pulled up the Penn data report for our district, which is our special education data report for 2022-2023. And 18% of our students are identified as other health impaired. And I'm kind of curious where they're fitting into. I'm going to guess probably learning support, but sort of where they fit into all of this. My daughter actually was other health support here in the district, so have a little personal experience with that, but just didn't realize the number was quite so high.
18% of students identified.
Students identified or identified as other health impaired.
Well, as you saw on the slide, and I wanted to stress this, that disability classification is not necessarily dry placement. There are no OHI classes, right? OHI support classes. So to your point, I would say that depends on their need. And in most cases, it's a little bit of both. It could be behavioral, it could be social, but yeah, most of it could be academic. The OHI piece, I think, gets to I guess, the impact something that has not been identified as a specific learning disability or behavior. Be attention, it could be ADHD, it could be on task focus, all these other different things that could be impacting their learning, their social skills, or their behavior. So that's what drives it. But if you're asking like, where do those students, where their service, it just really depends.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I was sort of more asking, thank you for that explanation,
Yeah.
sort of who they could be, where they could fit kind of, and I know that kids with ADD, ADHD, kind of chronic healthcare conditions that maybe rise beyond a 504 plan, or sometimes other health impaired, kids with some sort of, of executive functioning issues that don't necessarily fit in a specific learning disability. So but I thought it was interesting. And actually the state average is even, I know we're actually right on state average on that. So I was curious about that. I think the other thing is we have a slightly higher percentage of students with autism than the state average, and a higher percentage of kids with intellectual disabilities than the state average as well. And I just think it's interesting. And I think I just as a comment, I appreciate why they could both be kind of viewed in similar ways. But I think that, as you well know, with autism, there is such a spectrum that I would imagine that I hope that some of that would be taken into account, as planning, because certainly there are some kids with autism who, life skills support type programs would be totally inappropriate, right? So like, I think just sort of put that out there as well, especially since we have, almost 16% of our kids have autism, kids who've been identified. That's a pretty high number. So, and then the other thing is, I think that this framework is really important. This will give us a good basis from where to start. I just hope that the next sort of, phase 2 is really focusing on LRE, like least restricted environment, and how do we in fact make inclusion, which is everywhere in our strategic plan, a reality for all kids with disabilities, not just for kids with learning disabilities, maybe not just for kids with high functioning kids with autism, but for all of our students, those kids who are, who have emotional regulation challenges, the kids for whom, speech is a challenge, whoever it might be. I hope, for me as one board member, that's the next phase of all of this, because what I would like to see moving forward, once we sort of get a handle and a framework for all of this, is, okay, so we have these kids, and and we have a very big discrepancy between students educated inside the regular classroom 80% of the time or more than the rest of the state. Like, according to our Penn data, 48% of our students with disabilities are educated inside the regular classroom 80% or more of the time. State average is almost 62% of kids with disabilities are educated in a regular classroom. And I don't know, maybe because of all of our private school placements, that might bring that number down a little bit. I don't know, but I would hope that sort of the next sort of effort in all of this is, how do we think about, and we talked about this a little bit, how do we think about co-teaching? We did co-teaching in this district many, many, many years ago. Is there a way to start to bring that back? What are some other inclusive practices? How are we going to make sure that kids are actually being included and being supported appropriately? So that's just a comment more than anything else. That for me would be sort of the next phase of all of this. And then I just have some other kind of random thoughts that I can sort of share with you later, including, I love that we're piloting all these programs for learning support. I also, we have such great resources for learning support and structured literacy in our backyard. One of them is the AIM Academy, which is an amazing resource for structured literacy support, for PD. Happy to talk about that, put you in touch with the ladies who run that. It's a really, really great program. They have so much to offer and so much online now as well too. So, and then there's a professor at Bloomsburg who some of you may have worked with. His name is Tim Noster, Dr. Tim Noster. He's an amazing resource for behavior support, but particularly in the area of PD for teachers in the regular ed setting who are working with kids with emotional disabilities. He's a great guy. He's been around in Pennsylvania for eons, and I just highly recommend him. So I'll just stop with all of that, but I do really love talking about programs. So and I am just really excited to see the kind of outcome of all of this, and really excited to sort of see where this goes next. So thank you.
If I could just piggyback, we are too. LRE, I think our supervisors would agree. It's not necessarily a next thing. That's already part of this. If you recall correctly, in the beginning of the presentation, we started with what are all students have access to, because that's the framework and what we're starting with. That's why, as Dr. Lank said, we have general ed teachers, we have paraprofessionals, we have people on this because we need their voices to carry that back to the buildings. To shift, a culture, if it needs to be shifted. There are some buildings that are, a lot of them are already buying into this. So
Yeah,
but I do appreciate that.
Thank you. And I will say, I will echo, the paraprofessional inclusion is so great. That's such a great thing to hear that, to hear it's happening with intentionality, to hear that you're listening to the paraprofessionals about what their needs are and the teachers that they're working with. I think it is so great. So really excited for that.
Listen.
Hi. So thank you very much for that thorough and succinct presentation. I guess I just have one sort of comment, hope moving forward is that when we hear what you'd like to move forward with, what the committees would like to move forward with, I'm just really curious to hear about all of the programs that they're testing, and not just the ones that sort of got that everybody really liked, or that I'm just curious to hear sort of the outcomes of the ones that were tested that weren't crowd pleasers, or that just didn't work out for whatever reason. I'm really curious about all of the programs and excited.
Thank you. We can follow up with that. That's what Ms. Kuchler was talking about, and I think it leads to what you say, Mr. Williams, is it's not just about like the results, the numbers, right? We're going to be in there, we're going to look, we want to see how children are responding, engaged. Is it engaging? Is it challenging? Is it the teacher, is it user friendly? All those things are very important, and it is sustainable too. It's very important.
Thanks. Definitely join in the honor, respect. I feel like across the district, we're having conversations about standards of procedure, and we're hearing updates about what the progress. And so every time we come back, we're getting a little more from different departments, from different aspects. But then I appreciate all of the same umbrella of inspiration and resources, to unlock potential. And so I second to some of the things that were said around the qualitative data and evaluating of programs, but also to really, probably as co-chair of the policy committee, probably one of the most engaging conversations we had last year, right before you joined, Dr. Catrambone, was around behavior support, specifically the use of seclusion, restraints, and along those lines. And so, not that I'm asking for a thorough response tonight, but as we go forward, really looking at some of the conversations that were being had, some of the commitments to follow up around specific practices, and that's one that comes to mind most immediately. How might we bring those into the conversation moving forward in a way that respects creating systems, creating baselines, but also brings in some of the important conversations that may be had before we started this work or before this team was fully formed. So seclusion and restraints comes to mind specifically because that was really at the heart of some of the conversations with the policy 113. But Ms. Lohman eloquently mentioned quite some others that around PD and inclusion that applies to as well. So offering that for the record, not necessarily asking for a response to all of those things right now.
Well, one of the things in policy 113 does state that the board is to be updated 2 times per year. So that will be coming. This is about the halfway point.
Okay.
So I'll be getting that to Dr. Scribo. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Strauss. Okay, so let's go to the public and we'll start with if there are Zoom questions in the Q&A, and then we'll come to the conference.
Yeah, we do have two questions online. The first one comes from Georgina Perez Liz in Cheltenham. Can you please comment a little on the metrics that are used to evaluate the success of these trainings to staff?
If Georgina could state where she lives, we've got her name, that would be great.
She lives in Cheltenham.
Cheltenham. Thank you.
You repeat that, the metrics that we're using?
Yes. Comment a little on the metrics that are used to evaluate the success of these trainings to staff.
Can she clarify specifically what trainings? Like paraprofessionals, teachers, the pilot? It kind of depends. I mean, through the learning support training or through the learning support PD that the teachers are being given, we're going to be evaluating the outcome of the programs through raw data, through the student results, through the observations of administrators, supervisors, and teachers, through the teacher feedback, through any parent feedback if we need that, student feedback. Ms. Kuchler's overseeing the whole thing. That's what comes to mind with that. Yeah, and we are sending out a survey to the parents to gain their input. We'll send out a follow-up survey as well, and we're also surveying the staff. We're also communicating back to the staff through the principals and gathering their information and gathering their feedback that way as well. I don't know if she can absolutely reach out to me directly, and I would be happy to speak to her more, to give her more specifics.
And if she follows up, I'll read her.
I appreciate that.
Second question comes from Rebecca Condit from Elkins Park. This is a little longer. Great presentation. It's exciting to hear you talking about looking across the program horizontally and vertically, and it sounds like you are also taking into consideration how some of the broader programs, such as PBIS, work together with special ed. I was wondering if you're also looking at how we support students with 504 accommodation plans. There's a couple questions, so I'll repeat these after I get through them all. How can we create connections between those who are supporting students who have 504 plans and our district's experts in supporting students with disabilities who mostly sit within our special ed department? So again, the first question is, I was wondering if you were also looking at how we support students with 504 accommodation plans.
Okay, well so 504s specifically don't come under the special education department. That would come under student services. So she can reach out to student services. But we are constantly talking. I mean, student services, Ms. Keene and I are constantly talking because any students who identify that need supports either are identified through a 504 determination meeting, which would come out of a need that is brought in by the parent, or comes through the MTSS process. Sometimes those students who have 504s, eventually their need becomes a little greater and we have to evaluate them, and then it turns over to my office. And the second
one also involves 504s. I'll repeat it anyway. How can we create connections between those who are supporting students who have 504 and our district's experts in supporting students with disabilities who mostly sit within our special ed department?
She's still referring to 504s. I would say I would have to ask her to reach out to myself or Ms. Keene to clarify a little deeper on that.
And we did get a follow-up from Georgina Perez as well. Thank you. I wanted to clarify if the outcome measures involve different players, student measures of performance, as well as opinions, from staff and parents. So you answered my question. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for clarifying.
If I can take a stab, I don't know if this is what Rebecca is asking or not, but my guess is, because this is also, I had personal experience with this. When you have a kid who's sort of living in the 504 accommodation world, depending on kind of the knowledge of their parent, their needs for a 504 plan, 504 plans can be pretty involved. And involve like speech therapists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, et cetera. And I think the question might be like, how do we sort of cross bridges? And you guys may already be doing this without realizing you're doing it, but like making sure that the kids who are getting all of those services under a 504 plan are also kind of getting the benefit of the expertise of the special ed world in terms of, I don't know, like connecting. I think that's maybe what I'm not sure. Connecting the services that the kids are getting under a 504 plan to sort of some of the other programs that might or I don't know, trainings or, you know, I'm not quite sure. You know, I'm just trying to think of, but my own personal experience, my daughter, and I knew this, that, you know, when you have a kid who transitions from early intervention, a lot of times they're found ineligible for an IEP when they transition. Sometimes they're given a 504 plan. And so, and then what happens is she had she had 3 therapies under a 504 plan. She had physical therapy, speech therapy, and occupational therapy. I knew what to ask for, and I knew that could be part of a 504 plan. And I think the question then was sort of, and this was before we had MTSS here also, but like sort of how do you know at what point when things need to transition from a 504 plan to an IEP, and when should that happen, kind of, and I think that becomes complicated sometimes for some kids and some families. So I don't know if that was her question, but sort of the.
I mean, I can
connection.
reach out to her as
Yeah.
well, but I would echo what you just said. I think it would be coming through the MTSS process as well as the 504 team.
Yeah.
Do have another question that came in also.
Okay.
This one comes from Jervil Brown from Elkins Park. Do you consider the high mainstreaming in class participation of special education students a positive thing or a negative?
Do I consider the high mainstreaming? And try to interpret this the best I can. It really depends. Again, every child is different. Every child's IEP is their roadmap. So if, you know, I think that without going on a soapbox here, I think people have to understand that inclusion is actually never was a part of IDEA. It's never in the original wording. It was something that came out when IDEA was reauthorized in 1997. We used the term mainstream. I know when I first got into education, it was just kids that are mainstreamed, and now it's inclusion practices. Now inclusion can mean a whole bunch of things beyond special ed, but it really just comes down to the team sitting down and determining what the child needs and where those services can be best met in that environment. Sometimes they can be best met in the least restrictive environment. Sometimes that child needs to have more restrictions in the home school. And sometimes maybe they have to go to a cross-school program or low incidence that Dr. Lank spoke to. So really, unfortunately, it just depends. I think it's always best, and that's what IDEA charges us with. IDEA charges us with sitting down at every IEP team. And when we get to the end, we determine, when I say where, I don't mean physically where that child, I mean where in the IEP can we best meet the needs of the services. We are supposed to start with the general education environment with specially designed instruction, and then move from there to determine if the answer is not there, then what's the next thing? Do we need a special ed teacher to see that child? Do we need some behavior support do we need speech and language support 2 times 30 minutes a week? All of these things are determined at the IEP meeting.
Any other questions in the chat?
No more questions or comments in the chat.
Great. Anybody in the room with a question or comment? Oh, Dr. Smith, sorry, I didn't see your hand. Apologies.
Just wanted to make a quick comment, to thank the board again for approving the calendar change to allow for the, additional professional learning days. I know that came up, in a recent Ed Affairs meeting. What are we doing, with those hours? What does that time look like? And I just wanted to point out that it came up again tonight, that time is being used as additional time to help, support and to prepare our paraprofessionals to do this work in special education. So each time we get a chance to kind of point towards that, because it is something new and we hope that it continues. I do want to be intentional about pointing out how that time is being used to support our students. It may look like time outside of instruction, but allowing our paraprofessionals and our teaching staff to have additional time to learn and to kind of sharpen their tools, it helps our overall instructional programs.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Okay. No more questions from the public? All right, at this time, I would invite the motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Superintendent Williams.
That's why I stopped.
Second.
Software.